sanctions announced on the U.S. fiscal cliff. How is that going to affect investors here in Asia?
Well, I think that the Asian investors, or the people wanting to allocate assets, will definitely be choosing China and thus Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea also. The economic clock looks pretty okay out there, and Southeast Asia, all really because it still seems relative to index of Europe, especially of Europe, but also of Japan, to a lesser degree of America. It seems as if the Asian economies, the non-Japanese Asian economies, still have the semblance of an economic cycle where the economic clock does still work. And we think that this excess supply of money that's being injected by the central banks out here will continue feeding through into stronger markets, particularly because investors feel that the profits outlook out in non-Japan Asia is improving.
At the Central Economic Work Conference, Beijing's new leaders pledged to maintain prudent monetary policy and a proactive fiscal policy next year. What does that mean for investors in Asia?
Well, it means an awful lot because for the first time we're actually hearing some sensible economic policy. The Europeans aren't talking about prudent policies. The Americans aren't talking about prudent policies. The Japanese aren't talking about prudent policies. At least the Chinese, bless their souls, are saying that they want a prudent macro fiscal as well as monetary policy. They're, in other words, not just going to the piggy bank, not the central bank, but to the piggy bank, the ECB, the Fed, the BOJ, the Bank of Japan, and saying print more money because we politicians don't want to make decisions. The Beijing is actually saying, look, we want more of a pragmatic monetary policy as well as fiscal policy. So that's quite refreshing. I also continue maintaining, as I have actually for many months now, that the Chinese economy will continue stabilizing, moving up in cyclical fashion. China has very other issues, but I don't think that economic growth per se is really the one that we need to focus on.
China scrapped the ceiling on QFII investments for funds and central banks. If it relaxes rules that require our QFII investors to keep most of their funds in bonds, what will that mean for long-term foreign investors and the Asia market?
I don't think it's going to mean that much for either the foreign investor or for the Asian market, in other words, for the non-Chinese markets in Asia, just because I don't think that the Beijing is going to be so silly as to allow its capital accounts to be opened all of a sudden. I think that what you would see would be even more capital outflow by worried people in China. And I think that that's why they wouldn't want to open the capital accounts. That means, of course, if they don't open them, it's going to be still relatively difficult to get money into China and then subsequently, like in normal stock markets, quote unquote, get it back out, like in the UK, the US, or Hong Kong, or whatever. Having said this, I do think that the foreign investor will piggyback off the China story per se, off the growth story, and thus will move more into the Hong Kong markets. But I don't think that the Chinese in China will buy A shares, because I don't think that they trust the accounting and all that with these state-owned companies, these A shares that are listed, and they may buy more bonds just to get a little bit more interest income, but I wouldn't hold my heart out for that because I don't think that the Chinese citizens are fools either.